The Pittsburgh Steelers are in a win-win situation if Aaron Rodgers comes in right now. I'll explain on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the legacy, Louis DiBiase. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at some unsolved mysteries in the NFL on this holiday. We're going to talk about Anthony Richardson against Daniel Jones in Indianapolis. Also talk about whatever is going on in New Orleans. But we're going to start with what looks like Aaron Rodgers setting himself up to join the Pittsburgh Steelers shortly. Before we get into all of that, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Louis, obviously, happy holidays to everybody who celebrates Memorial Day, and of course, shout out to our military friends and everyone we're honoring on this day. But with that being said, there are some unsolved mysteries in the NFL, and I start with the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback situation. They have Will Howard, of course. They bring back Mason Rudolph as a backup, but everyone is expecting Aaron Rodgers to be the quarterback in Pittsburgh. And my guy Chris Carter over at Locked On Steelers kind of broke down where things are at, what he expects, and why it could be a little bit of an issue.
Aaron Rodgers is probably going to join Pittsburgh because he wants to be on a team that's been competitive. This isn't like the Jets where, they are trying to turn everything around and he's a big part of that. He's joining a team that's made the playoffs 4 out of the last 5 seasons and just can't get over the hump of getting further in the playoffs than just making it there. Aaron Rodgers ain't the same guy that he was in his prime, but he can still play at a high level. He can still be a guy that can play it to an offense, and I think be that kind of that kind of quarterback that they need in the Steelers offense that does the right things but doesn't have to do too much, because this needs to be an offense that again runs the football well. The question will be, can he get into Pittsburgh and can he set up that rapport? To me, I think one thing that Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers could be overlooking, and as far as importance, is if this does drag on into minicamp and Aaron Rodgers doesn't show, or he signs when he wants to sign, because again, he still hasn't signed with the Steelers. It's not that he's not a Pittsburgh Steeler yet officially. But if he doesn't, it could become truly irritating to the Steelers teammates if he keeps continuing to be the story, and every day during OTAs and then minicamp, if he doesn't show for that. I think he will show for that, but if every day they're just being asked about it, that's not a way to endear yourself to your teammates when you're supposed to be the quarterback that everyone's trying to protect and everyone's trying to work with moving forward.
Obviously, boots on the ground. Chris knows his stuff. That's a great point that I haven't heard before. I think Rodgers needs to come in soon. I have my own reasons, but the impact it could have on his teammates to talk about him like that's something I hadn't considered.
Aaron Rodgers doesn't care, though. Everything that Aaron Rodgers does is about Aaron Rodgers, so I don't think he has the Pittsburgh Steelers really in mind as his top priority, and I don't personally think he's worth all of this trouble. I didn't think that 2 months ago, and now that he has all this power over Pittsburgh, I certainly don't think he's worth it. But Chris mentioned something kind of specific that has me thinking they should go in another direction here at quarterback, maybe even just stick with Will Howard this year. He talked about how they don't need much at quarterback. They want to just run the football and lean on their defense. Well, then why are they having Aaron Rodgers hold them prisoner? Like, I don't agree with the Pittsburgh Steelers approach. I think it's arrogant that they think year after year they have this almost Eagles-like roster where they don't need a star quarterback when they clearly do. They don't win playoff games this way. But if this is the strategy they're going to be stubborn with, then why are they so hell-bent on waiting and letting Aaron Rodgers have all this power? Honestly, I would personally go with Will Howard for the 2025 season. If he's not the guy, then you have a higher pick next year. But Pittsburgh's just hell-bent on this strategy of winning 9 to 10 games a year because that's what Pittsburgh does. We don't rebuild. We compete for championships, but that's actually holding them back from competing for championships.
Well, that's why I think there is a little bit of a win-win window here, but it is based on the timing. So I think that going with Will Howard is a fine option because the Steelers could finally take their medicine, look themselves in the mirror and say, hey, we got to do something aggressive here. Yeah. And you could say that, hey, we believe in our roster. Like you're saying, you could sell all that to the fans so you can do it. And you have a lot of currency built up with that fan base with what you've done. So I think they could get through a year of Will Howard and Mason Rudolph and kind of chug their way to a top 10 pick and then trade up and sell all out for a quarterback they like out of a group that could be good last. That's a win. The other side of it is, though, I do think that Aaron Rodgers makes them a competitive football team and all of the things about, hey, we've gotten to the playoffs 4 out of 5 years and all of that. I think, if things broke right and Aaron Rodgers is a passenger instead of the driver. He was trying to drive the New York Jets to something they haven't done since 1971. In Pittsburgh, he can just be a passenger. So I think it's a win-win there, but that is contingent on him coming in now because not only the point about getting questions asked, but it's about getting the best version of 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers. And if you're not going, they're going to Cabo together to throw with his teammates and learning the playbook together in some of these OTAs and mini camps. If you don't have that head start and Rodgers just shows up at training camp like, yeah, I finally came to save you, hobos, that is going to be a bad vibe in the locker room. You're not going to max out the Aaron Rodgers potential and make him just one of the guys, a passenger in the car like he really needs to be right now. He doesn't need to be the main character. He doesn't need to be the best actor. He needs to be a supporting character. I think it'd be good for him. It'd be good for Pittsburgh. So they get that. It's a win. But if he doesn't come in until training camp, they're better off going with Will Howard.
Yeah, I totally agree. I find it interesting, though. I almost think he does kind of have to be a main character like he was with the New York Jets because Pittsburgh, again, I don't think they are this juggernaut roster like the 2023 San Francisco 49ers or this past year's Philadelphia Eagles where they just need a game manager. I think their roster's strong enough where when they have that kind of player like an Aaron Rodgers or a Russell Wilson last year or a Justin Fields that doesn't turn the ball over, makes some explosive deep plays, a couple times a game, they can win 9 games. But this hasn't been a recipe. This is what annoys me about it on the Pittsburgh side instead of talking about Aaron Rodgers is right. They act like this strategy has been proven to get to at least conference championships or the divisional round, and it hasn't. So that's where, like when Chris mentioned, they don't need like the guy. They need Rodgers just to be a guy. Maybe that's true for what they want, but I think they need more than that, and that's why I don't think Rodgers is that player. They might as well see if a young guy can be, and if not, finally commit to finding that person. I just don't know why they're so hell-bent on this approach, and because they are, Rodgers has them by the you-know-whats, and he can do whatever he's getting his way again, and it annoys me like crazy.
And for him, it's just about buying time. And again, if Rodgers is saying, I'll join, but I'm not showing up until training camp because I want my whole June and my whole July, I think it would be better to go with Will Howard. But if Aaron Rodgers is going to come in right now and start that process and quit making all these people ask questions about him and quit putting the attention all on him and start being part of the team, then I think it can be a win for the Steelers to do it this way. But it's funny, when do the Steelers win championships? It's when they draft their quarterback. I mean, I wasn't alive, but correct me if they drafted Terry Bradshaw, and then, of course, they draft Ben Roethlisberger, but now they're like, hey, what works is the opposite of what has worked for us.
That's the funniest part is there's an arrogance of like, we don't do things your way. We're the Pittsburgh Steelers. We have these 6 championships because we do things our way. It's like, well, actually, you did things the way the league's doing it now in the past, and that's what won titles. This whole thing you do now, this holier-than-thou strategy, it gets you to 9 wins, and they just refuse to be like everybody else. So I think their arrogance gets in the way, and now they're going for the most arrogant quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, maybe it's a match made in heaven to burn it down to the studs. You know what I mean? Like, maybe this is what they needed. They needed to invite the Joker into the kingdom to burn the forest down. That's mixing a lot of lines from that movie, but I'm sure everybody's on board.
Tyler,
with that
Aaron Rodgers is like a mirror. He's going to just show it right in front of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, I'm you, basically, in quarterback form. Yeah. That's
crazy. What a great point. Absolutely had to get that in there. Now, though, we got to talk about another unsolved mystery, and it's in New Orleans with their weird quarterback situation. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, entertainment? It's so easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Look, it's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, your spending, all in one place. Stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. For me, it's about seeing it in front of me, just how much money I was spending on online shopping. And now that I know I can budget smarter and save more, and I can do it all without juggling multiple apps, it's all in one place with Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, Louis, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. Talked about Aaron Rodgers' situation with Pittsburgh. There are so many different avenues to discuss that situation and where Pittsburgh could go, where they should go, what Rodgers should want, all of that. If I'm him, I'm just going to stay retired and everything. But hey, look, football's a great game. I guess if I could have played it longer, I certainly would have. But speaking of playing football, that's what the New Orleans Saints are doing down there in the Bayou. And they got a quarterback situation going on that we have talked about a little bit here and there. We had Ross on Friday's show to kind of break down where he's at. And what Ross was saying is that Tyler Shough, because he was the one drafted by the new coach, by, the new management in town, that Tyler Shough has the lead. And he mentions that here. But Ross, who's got boots on the ground like Chris Carter as well, talked on Locked On Saints about how it was Spencer Rattler who actually took an early lead.
Spencer Rattler is off to an early lead, an early start for that New Orleans Saints quarterback battle up against rookie quarterback Tyler Shough. Both quarterbacks took the field, one after the other, alternating constantly, all of this good stuff. Spencer Rattler was working with the first team, while Tyler Shough worked with the second team. And Spencer Rattler got off to an early lead in this quarterback battle. Now, he's going to have to work to maintain that. And he's also probably going to have to work to even kind of lengthen or grow the divide between the two if he wants to be that week one starter. We've been talking about this for weeks. That Tyler Shough is kind of at a little bit of an advantage here, being Kellen Moore's handpicked guy. I know people are tired of hearing me say that, but I'm just telling you the truth. So Spencer Rattler, if he wants to win this job, which he absolutely wants to do, and absolutely has the talent to do, by the way, is going to have to do so by completely separating himself from Tyler Shough. This was an early start for Spencer Rattler.
I mean, everyone expected Shough, me too. Rattler drafted last year in 2024, so he's going into year two. Maybe that gives him an advantage over Tyler Shough just being in the league for a year. But I'm looking at New Orleans and I'm like, I don't really care who starts out of these two guys. You're going to be terrible this year.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It kind of feels like when the Cleveland Browns had drafted DeShone Kizer in the second round. It's like, well, you got to give this guy a chance. Like, I mean, I guess, but we know they're not going to win more than one or two games. Like, it's all about next year's quarterback class. And I agree. I think Spencer Rattler could end up winning the job. He's a younger player. See what he's got. If he's awful, you're going to have the number one overall pick next year, which I think is a very good possibility for New Orleans. Mm-hmm. In a vacuum, that sounds like a good strategy. I think drafting a 26-year-old backup quarterback in the second round, though, is a hell of an investment to make. So if that is the case and Shough doesn't win the job, that draft pick is going to look pretty brutal. I mean, he's going to be 26 by the end of September. So, I mean, I don't know what the idea was behind that. If you really thought Rattler, if you were going to give Rattler a real chance, I just, that pick seems odd to me.
Well, that's exactly where I was going. Like, we could talk about how Tyler Shough has an advantage because he was the guy who was drafted by the current regime. That's great. But Tyler Shough should have an advantage because he's older as well. I mean, he is older than Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler is going to be 25 in September, where Shough is going to go up to 26. So, like, to me, it would be an outright disaster if Shough could not beat out Rattler, even with Shough being a rookie, because you drafted a quarterback this old who had been in college for 7 years. He backed up Justin Herbert at Oregon. That's how long Tyler Shough has been in college. the reason you draft a guy like that in the second round is because they are ready to play right away, and there's uncertainty with Derek Carr. The uncertainty with Derek Carr turned into worst case scenario, or maybe it turned into best case scenario. Really, you look at the financial ramifications for the Saints. Maybe that was what's best for them going forward. But you draft Tyler Shough because he's a guy who's ready to play. He's got a ton of experience, 7 years in college. He's going to be 26. Like, this is a guy who should be able to go on the field right away. And they clearly didn't believe in Spencer Rattler that much because they went and paid what they paid for Tyler Shough. So if Rattler beats out your boy, and you have to clearly admit this guy who we didn't draft beat out the guy who we did believe in, that would be a disaster. And with Shough being so old, like you said, this isn't like we'll check him out next year. Like, no, he should be ready to play right now. You don't get that pass with a guy this old.
No, at that point, he'll be like 27. This feels very much kind of like when the Cleveland Browns, not to make two Browns analogies in the segment, but they drafted Brandon Weeden in the first round. It's like, what's the end game here? You know, like if you drafted Shough in the third, fourth, fifth round, okay, I'd understand. That's a player right away you need because Derek Carr's injured. You got to have somebody there. He can play right away. Maybe he's your short-term answer. But a second-round pick is a really big investment. Like, do they really believe he has a chance to be the long-term franchise quarterback? I just have a really hard time understanding that draft pick, especially if he doesn't end up winning the job this year. But I guess in the grand scheme of things, Tyler, it doesn't really matter because everything is about next year's quarterback class, I think, for New Orleans. I don't think either one, Rattler or Shough, are realistically going to be the answer. Which,
to me, I guess it's the same thing as, like, a lot of people said, the Browns are smart because they traded back. They got an extra first for next year's quarterback class. Yeah. And then they go use 2 picks on quarterbacks and trade 2 picks to move up and get Shedeur Sanders. It's like if the whole plan is for 2026 QB to find your starter, then why would you do those things? With the Saints, it's like if the plan is like we're going to be bad and we know it and, next year's QB class, then why do you spend a second-round pick?
You just burned a second-round pick on fire for no reason.
It just, it doesn't add up. Quite honestly, but I think it's funny that you use 2 Browns examples, and it's like, if you're talking about how you could fail at the quarterback position, it's just hard not to run into a Browns example. But speaking of the Cleveland Browns, I do want to at least throw this out here. Let's say Tyler Shough is a disaster. He can't start. It doesn't look good. I personally don't think he's going to be a good player because he's not tough in the pocket. He wants to fall back, doesn't want to take shots, can't win like that in the NFL. You got to take those bullets. But I'm not super high on Spencer Rattler either. He seems like a guy who has some talent, but just probably never put it together. Would you go to Cleveland? And if you went to Cleveland, would you want Flacco or would you want Pickett? And would you prefer somebody maybe like Jameis Winston from New York?
Ooh, yeah. I personally wouldn't want a guy that I think might steal games. And again, it depends on who you're asking. If you're asking Kellen Moore, he probably wants a Joe Flacco.
Right, if they decided they wanted to win games, and you're Kellen Moore, who do you want?
Yeah, then I'd probably want Joe Flacco. But if I'm thinking from a management perspective, I'm like, I want that top pick next year, and I don't want any of these quarterbacks like messing that up like Drew Lock did for the Giants last year. Then I'd probably rather go for a Kenny Pickett or say, hey, you guys actually like Shedeur better than Dylan Gabriel. We'll take another young flyer, and we'll go for Gabriel here. So that's maybe worth a shot because we know he's not going to risk anything for next year. But if they're trying to win games, I think it's probably Flacco.
Yeah, I think that makes sense too. It is definitely Flacco. It's funny. I think if they're trying to win games, Flacco is the answer. I think the most realistic answer is Kenny Pickett because he was with Kellen Moore in Philadelphia last year. We've talked about that. But I think the answer that might be the best answer for them to thread this needle is Jameis Winston. Yeah. Because Winston is going to come in and he's going to make some people think, they're trying to win games. And there are some people in New Orleans who just love him because he was there for a while. You know what I mean? Like, we got Jameis back. This is great. And they're just going to be happy. But we all know that while Winston is going to do some awesome things, he giveth and he taketh. He'll probably still get you that high pick anyway.
Yeah, it's going to be a 1-point game in the fourth quarter, 2 minutes left, and he's going to throw a pick and triple coverage on first and 5 after a penalty, 100%. Yeah. So honestly, I'm with you. I think Winston's remove Cleveland. You might go to New York. Like the Jameis Winston idea, the reunion with the Saints might be perfect.
Yeah,
or how about Tommy Cutlets, Tyler? Like, go get Tommy DeVito. That'll be fun too.
There we go. There you go. A little cultural exchange right there between New Orleans and New York.
Yeah.
Love that. But yeah, either way, man, The Saints, it's just hard for me to wrap my head around this. But either way, we got to go to Indianapolis, where I got to tell you, no matter what happens at quarterback, I think it's probably going to be a tough season. All right, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. Again, holiday edition here. Happy Memorial Day to everybody out there who's celebrating. But with that being said, we're doing a little unsolved mysteries on this holiday. We talked about the Steelers quarterback situation, talked about the Saints. Now I got to talk about the Indianapolis Colts. Before we do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. As training camp gets closer and moves are being made, hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. But with that being said, I do got to talk about Indianapolis. And you look at Anthony Richardson and you look at Daniel Jones, and I guess I want to color it from this perspective, because within, it's yin-yang, man. It's yin-yang. Within all bad, there is a speck of good. There is something in there. And with the Colts, I think that there's no way they can escape a bad outcome this season, depending on who you are. Because number one, Anthony Richardson looks worse. Looks bad. He's not the guy. That's a bad outcome. Daniel Jones looks good. He probably drags you to 7 or 8 wins. That's kind of a bad outcome. He's not the long-term answer, and you didn't give yourself a pretty good pick. And even if both quarterbacks are absolutely terrible and they lead you to a top pick, well, you're probably not going to win very many games. And to some Colts fans, that's a bad season, no matter what, even if it means you got a draft pick high in the draft. So I don't see an outcome here where Anthony Richardson takes some huge leap and the Colts make the playoffs. I don't see that as an outcome. I'm sorry, maybe I'm, a hater, Titans guy out here saying the Colts have no good outcomes. I can already see the comments, but I'm just saying I have a hard time looking at it. And even people who I know who are Colts fans, they aren't very optimistic for the season ahead.
Yeah, no, it's still a massive projection with Richardson. It's what you believe he can be, not what he's been. Because the film last year didn't make you feel any better about him taking strides. And the Colts knew it was going to be a long-term project with Richardson. Coming out of Florida, he had 14 career starts, if that. Yeah. So the guy barely played any football. So you knew it was going to be
terribly, though.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. The issue is, and again, he hasn't shown anything on the field to really make you believe he's going to take strides, but you haven't really helped this guy either. You knew this was a long-term project. This was a really raw prospect. And yet, I think after Gardner Minshew almost made the playoffs for that team, they got a taste for winning now, right away. So last year, they had Flacco, who had just brought Cleveland to the playoffs. They pulled Richardson early, and I thought that was a mistake. And now they're bringing in Daniel Jones, who's won a playoff game and at least got by with the New York Giants. And now he's breathing down Richardson's neck. If you believe still that projection with Richardson can pay off, I don't think if you really still want to see that through, that's still plan A. And maybe it's not for the Colts, but if it is, I think they're just not handling this the right way. I think bringing in Daniel Jones, not that he's amazing, but I feel like that kind of was a mistake. They should have, I think, just gone all in on Richardson this year.
Well, I think that's what they tried to do last year, and they jumped off the boat. And I don't think you can get back on now. I think the ship has sailed.
That's fair.
I think you got to find a new ship, and I think that's why they get Daniel Jones, because I agree with you. If they still believe that Anthony Richardson could be something, they would not have gotten Daniel Jones. But I think they know it, but they can't get rid of Richardson yet with his contract and everything. It's only been 2 years. You can't really do that. After year 3, if he falls apart, then your fans and your fan base will kind of take it. But I just think they don't believe in Anthony Richardson. I think it would be hard to, but I agree with you. They botched it. Last year, they should have just wrote it out. But I agree with your assessment that they saw Gardner Minshew get them close to the playoffs, and they saw Joe Flacco take the Browns to the playoffs, and they're like, we want to win. They lost sight of the mission, and the mission is to find out if this guy is a franchise quarterback. Let him go. Look at Bryce Young in his second year. Started out terrible. Now, in theory, you could argue back, well, they benched him, and then they put him back in, and he got better, and the Colts did the same thing. You know what I mean? But Richardson was a less confident player with less experience than a guy like Bryce Young to go back and be like, no, I'm a good player. Like, I've done it at the highest levels. Richardson didn't have that experience to lean on, so you bench him and then put him back in, and all the, I was tired and all this different stuff, like the scrutiny he got from that. They've just handled it so poorly. They criticized him in that moment. You just need to do it more privately, I think. I think they're totally out on Richardson, which to me makes the Daniel Jones move a good move because he can at least play similarly. He's not the athlete that Anthony Richardson, but Daniel Jones can run and do those quarterback run game things. So I think it was a smart move, but I agree with you that it's only a smart move in my mind because I think they have given up on Anthony Richardson. If you haven't and you still believe in him, then adding Daniel Jones, who is true competition, rather than supporting him with an older vet, would still be a mistake.
Yeah, you're right. If they are out, then this move
it really
is
depends
fine.
on how they truly feel.
But I'm having a hard time giving them the benefit of the doubt in that way because they did this exact thing last year with Joe Flacco when they were still in on Anthony Richardson. So, yeah, I don't know. I think quarterback's different. Like, you have to handle things in a different way. And when you have a raw player like this, it would have been, and I'm not saying Richardson was going to become Josh Allen or ever will be, but it would have been like the Bills. They made the playoffs in 2017 with Tyrod Taylor. They said, no, that's not enough. We want more. We're going to go for this really risky prospect out of Wyoming. It would have been like in 2018, Allen shows these growing pains, and they're like, never mind. Let's go back to a Tyrod type of player. We showed we can win 9 games before. And it's a very Steelers-like approach for the Colts. And again, I'm more of a long-term, go-for-it kind of guy, so if that's what they still want with Richardson, then I don't agree with their approach. But if you're right and they are out, then, yeah, Daniel Jones will be fine, and I think he'll keep them competitive in the AFC South.
Yeah, you need to be all in or all out.
Exactly.
But with that, I do want to transition to something that is somewhat of a solemn topic. Colts owner Jim Irsay did pass away over the weekend, and did want to take a moment and play you a clip from an episode of Locked On Colts where Zach Kiefer, who was very close to Irsay, who writes for The Athletic, made an appearance on Locked On Colts to kind of talk about Irsay's legacy and his story and everything. So I wanted to play that real quick for you guys.
Yeah, Jake, interesting is a good word, but it probably doesn't do full justice, right? So after I left the Colts beat to sort of move to a national beat, I travel around the country and I'm at every NFL training camp, games all over the place. And the one question I get more than any other from beat writers, from agents, from assistant coaches, from executives is, what is Jim Irsay really like? And I always tell them, like, how much time do you have? Because this could be a 10-minute answer. This could be a 3-hour answer. And that's what a relationship with Jim Irsay was like. You know, you get into sports because you love sports, but also I got into sports coverage because I was fascinated by the people in the game and around the game. And I don't think I'll ever meet anyone as interesting, as unique as Jim Irsay. You know this. Anyone who's been around the Indianapolis media market knows this. I always thought that his perception nationally was one thing, and it was almost a polar opposite in Indianapolis.
So I just want to say this. I didn't know Jim Irsay personally. I'm not going to pretend like I know he was this or he was that. Every human being has their flaws, and we all have our stories and experiences. But Irsay was a guy who was all in or all out for the NFL. And I know a lot of people, I travel to Indianapolis quite a bit. It's pretty close to me. It's not, Chicago or New York City or anything, but a lot of people there do believe that Jim Irsay and what happened with the Colts and Peyton Manning, the house that Peyton Manning built there has really helped the city of Indianapolis kind of grow and things like that. So I'm sure that's a factor. But I just want to say, more importantly than anything, at the end of the day, we watch football to be entertained in this short time on earth with bills and pain and death and loss and all these. We just want to be entertained and have fun and feel joy. And in the novella, as one of my mentors, Laker Film Room, would say, sports is just a novella. It's a soap opera for all of us to pay attention to. Jim Irsay was a fun character to follow in the soap opera that is professional sports and professional football. So rest in peace to Jim Irsay from that perspective.
Yeah, I just love owners that care. You know what I mean? And again, it's hard to know how he was behind closed doors, although the stories have been awesome to read and to listen to.
It's been cool.
But I just, there's not every owner out there that really cares about their organization, that winning is the priority. And, sometimes people don't like a hands-on owner, but I really liked what Jim Irsay's approach was, and he did trust his football guys, but he cared at the same time. And that's something that's important to me in sports. So I think in that way, Jim Irsay was really valuable to the Colts and to the city of Indianapolis.
As a fan of the Colts, you knew that Jim Irsay truly wanted to win. Like, he truly did. Maybe you don't agree with his decisions. And we talked about, the bouncing on Anthony Richardson to go to Flacco. That might have been a directive from Jim Irsay. Like, you never know, so it's not like every decision is correct or right, but at the end of the day, knowing that your owner truly does care, I think that does matter to fans. So shout out to Jim Irsay for being a fun character within the whole grand scheme of things and being an owner who truly cared about his football team and in his city. But with that being said, that's going to do it for us today. Hope you guys do enjoy your holiday. Of course, I am your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Legacy, Louis DiBiase. As I tell you every episode, thanks for tuning in and stay safe out there.